the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.
Ready.
AVWeek.
Performing scan.
Week.
Online.
This is AVWeek.
AVWeek, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. My name is Tim Albert. I'm your host. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, whenever you're listening and or watching this. If you're watching live, it's afternoon in most parts of the continental United States. With us this afternoon, a longtime friend, haven't seen him for a while. He missed Infocom, sadly, but his name is Adrian Boyd from AVTexture,
missed
the world's
Infocom.
longest Twitter. How are you, sir? He's apparently the government is monitoring us, so he's
Be back.
yeah. Also with us for our first time, his name is Paul Zeal. He's from
dropping
AMX.
frames again.
His name is Paul Zeal. He's from AMX Network and VTC expert. How are you, Paul?
I'm good. Nice to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I should fly you over to AVTexture and have you take a look at Adrian's setup and see.
I'm going to be in Washington next week. So
Well, there you go.
Everybody else but me.
Everybody else, yes, everybody else but you. All right, this week we'll tackle a couple different things.
Google, actually.
Crestron has they have an interesting product name. None of us on this panel know what it is, but we'll talk about that. Also, DiGiCo has picked up another board manufacturer. But first and foremost, from our friend Ted Green over at Strategy.com, Nortek drops $46.2 million, and a gentleman by the name of Sean Burke is out as the head of the Technology Solutions Group. The article goes on to say that Nortek in general is fine. They posted 13.9% increase. To $718 million, up from $630 in 2013. However, in something that's kind of interesting, the fact that they broke out the AV division earnings, I guess is the best way to put this, and said, oh yeah, by the way, this group over here, not as profitable as the rest of us. And then Mr. Burke goes on, according to the press release, to pursue other interests. Which in the world of press releases, 9 times out of 10 means that he has been asked to tender his resignation to go seek employment elsewhere. I don't know that that's what happened, but good Lord, that's usually what that wording means. So Paul, let me ask you this: you've been around AV a long time. You've watched this Nortek group kind of take shape over the last few years. What's your take on the fact that first of all, Nortek needed to say, hey, by the way, this group is not as profitable, and also the exit of Mr. Burke?
well, a lot of this sounds to me in a public company, and it's actually very interesting because for the last 6 weeks or so, I've belonged to a public company again, and you can pick up an awful lot about the company you work for from the SEC 10K filings, and that's not necessarily there. And my guess on why they broke it out is there's a possibility that they say that that's not the core product set for us. And in breaking it out, they're showing that that's where their weaknesses are, and if they're looking to spin it off into something else, hopefully the shareholders will say, oh, they got rid of that dead weight and work on the stock. So I'm curious if it's if it's interesting that they're going to break some things off. Because there's some odd mixes in there. They've got TV1, who used to be a consumer-based home-type system, but they've really grown more into the commercial space and doesn't fit in with the rest of the Kramer, the Geffen and Furman and some of those other pieces. So it might be interesting to see if they're going to try to reorganize that either realign or get out of the AV business. It's very difficult for a company that doesn't concentrate on AV to play in this market.
Do you think, you mentioned possibly reorganizing, do you think it's something where they would take the entire AV group and say, Mr. Investor, Mrs. Investor, Mrs. Fund manager, take this entire group, or do you think maybe that they'll piecemeal it off one piece at a time? Maybe there's one or two divisions or one or two sub companies that aren't doing so hot, and maybe there's one or two shining stars that are doing just fine.
There's one or two pieces I would like to buy. But I don't get a say. So
I will mention that Paul is a part of a publicly held company.
Well, and mention even more that Paul gets no say in what that publicly held company does.
and I don't either. I don't own Harman. Although that wouldn't be a bad investment. Nortek right now may not be, but
if I could backdate it a year, they're up like 100% over the last year. Their stock has just been screaming.
Shoot. Did you guys work out? I shouldn't ask you that. Never mind. I'm not going to ask about stock options and stuff.
Well, we haven't. We're still in the merging stage. We're told that things are supposed to be complete by October 31st, but other than people calling and asking for technical favors, I really haven't gotten much information on Harman.
Yeah. I have a Harman friend anyway. Yeah, Bradford Ben gets me all the.
Yeah.
He got me he got me a pair of headphones once. That's what he got me. So
he gets to make decisions. We did get invited to the amazing Harman employee-only yard sale.
Really? How was that?
Get all our consumer AV gear at about 70 to 95% off.
And so when will AMX be part of that yard sale?
Oh, I don't know when we'll be part of the yard sale, but I loaded up on Harman and JBL.
Very nice. Very nice. All right, Adrian. Before we get Paul fired, what do you think of Nortek? Singling out the AV division and Mr. Burke being shown the door, as it were.
Well, when we look at Nortek, they're kind of. I think they're seeing some of the reaction that the industry has kind of seen in terms of residential. It's been a little slower. It's starting to pick up, but they have a lot of manufacturers that are complementary to each other. That there's a lot of overlap in what they do. You've got Geffen and TV1. They have some products that compete with each other. Magenta, which is the TV1. So when I look at a lot of what they do, I think there's probably going to be some merging of some of these companies, or at least eliminating some of the companies that don't fit their core over time. And they're also one of the biggest HVAC companies in terms of what they've got, and ventilation. It's a big hodgepodge of all sorts of different technologies, but there's a lot of overlap in a lot of things they do.
Yeah. All right, Adrian, you might want to restart something. Shut down. I don't know. Shut down your.
I'm going to drop out and come.
Your AOL Instant Messenger, and restart. So, while he does that, we'll talk with Paul about another company making headlines this week, and that's the fact that DiGiCo. So DiGiCo and Allen Heath and Calrec rather. They're forming a new pro audio group, according to this piece from Sound and Communications. The way that the story was first told to me, though, was that it was DiGiCo buying Allen and Heath to form this new company. Now, it depends on how you read the press release or how you read the piece. Regardless, the same company that owns DiGiCo now owns Allen and Heath. And it's interesting to me the fact that over the last few years, a number of significant audio console companies have combined forces. The most striking one to me is still the fact that Midas is now owned by Behringer. I think it's Behringer. Behringer is a economy brand board manufacturer and console manufacturer, audio manufacturer, and Midas is more on the other extreme. So all of these different companies kind of consolidating efforts. Paul, do you think this is more indicative of kind of still a backlash of the economy and where we've been, or is it just, this has just been a good time for companies to kind of combine sources? The press release does mention the fact that both groups have an awful lot of really good engineers, and so maybe that's what they're thinking: get all these smart people in together in one location, and let's make some really, really good kick butt consoles.
Well, that's a big plus that goes on this. There's a lot of duplication that can go into consoles, and quite frankly, compared to DiGiCo and CalRec, Allen and Heath is a budget console.
No, that's true. That's true.
So,
that's a valid point.
I mean, Allen and Heath moves all the way down into the consumer and DJ, and peaks out at the top just about where DiGiCo and CalRec would pick up. DiGiCo in the live and CalRec in the studio.
Yeah.
So when you look at the three product sets, they have almost no overlap. DiGiCo is big live and event. CalRec is big expensive recording studios, and Allen and Heath is from 2 turntables and a microphone up through
nice.
Up through a nice club or a regional type console, but they're not going to be mistaken for a Midas or a CalRec at any point. But still, all consoles have manufacturing. They've all got power supplies. They've all got preamps. So there can be a lot of economies of scale there. And in this case, there's almost nothing parasitic where anybody would have to drop something from their product line to avoid duplication. So it looks like a good fit to me.
Okay, that makes sense. Adrian, from your standpoint, what do you think? What do you think about this whole? You look at it as a marriage, or you looking at it as a buyout? I mentioned the fact that some people have said to me when I first heard about this, it was the fact that it was put to me like DiGiCo was buying Allen and Heath, and this press release on Sound and Communications makes it sound more like a merger. Regardless, what do you make of the fact that now DiGiCo and CalRec and Allen Heath are all being manufactured by the same people?
I think it's just more of the consolidation of our industry. Manufacturers are looking for other partners that can bring either something complementary to what they already have got, or looking at new verticals. And Paul's kind of right. When we look at CalRec and DiGiCo, they don't play in the same space that Allen Heath does by and large, and Allen Heath doesn't really play in their stuff. I mean, I've seen a lot of CalRec going in broadcast and those environments where Allen and Heath is really popular in portable DJ systems and houses of worship, and so I think it's just more of that consolidation of technology that our industry has.
That makes sense. All right, let's talk about Apple for a second, and I guess you don't have to full disclosure here, but I have an Apple TV. I love it. I don't have a whole lot of Apple products, but I do have an iPad, and then this is one of the main devices that my children watch Netflix on. According to a study from onstreamingmedia.com, it says that Apple TV market shares have fallen by 11 points. This is on the heels of a number of different set-top boxes, not least of which I shouldn't call the Google Chrome little HDMI thing well, it's not a set-top box, but it's a streaming device. And then you have the Roku, and you have the Boxee, and you have a number of other devices. But the fact that it's losing market share, Adrian, where are we going with this when it comes to Apple and the Apple TV and just streaming boxes in general? Is it the fact that they're losing market share, more the fact that they're having more competition, or are people shying away from having one dedicated device and relying more and more on the embedded apps in all these smart displays?
Oh, I think it's the latter. It's when you look at the penetration of smartphones and tablets in the market. What's easier? I can watch, say, Netflix on my phone, on my iPad, my Android device, and it goes wherever I go as long as I have reliable Wi-Fi or some sort of reliable data plan. I don't think Apple TV is going away. I do think that there is some pressure from a lot of the other streaming devices because they give a little bit more options in Apple's closed ecosystem. I think that if Apple, we're starting to see, at least in some of their other areas, that they're starting to open up a little bit and add more things. I think if they do that with the Apple TV, and allow things like Amazon Prime and other streaming services to coexist in their environment, they'll probably pick right up again, because it is a reliable box when it comes to streaming. And if you set up your iPad properly, you can basically send content from your iPad straight to the Apple TV, and we do a lot of that in our household because I've got every flavor except for the Chromecast of streaming box, and sometimes it's more convenient just go and bring up my app and send it straight to the Apple TV instead of going over to Western Digital or bringing up the Roku.
Do you think you mentioned the Amazon Prime, and the reason I'm bringing it up because that's one of the devices or one of the services that we have.
Yeah.
Do you think that they ever will? Because Apple in the past has not played well with others that they deem to be in direct competition with them.
Yeah, I think Apple's probably going to start looking at different strategies to make money. I mean, you saw kind of some of that when they saw the writing on the wall in terms of music streaming services gaining more popularity with the Spotifys and the Pandoras. And with they didn't buy Beats just for headphones. They bought Beats for their streaming library, and they make that coexist probably with their iTunes radio. I think Apple, in terms of if they really want to keep being the market leader as they have been, they're going to have to start letting other people play in their sandbox a little more succinctly.
I think one of those things that is going to allow that to happen, as sad as it is that Mr. Jobs passed away 3 years ago, the fact that Steve Jobs is no longer there, right? That was probably one of the biggest sticking points to letting people play well in their sandbox.
Well, he had a singular vision in terms of how he wanted things to work.
Yeah.
And that got them to certain positions when they started the company in the early 80s, in the mid 80s, and then he left. Apple floundered. When he came back, we saw Apple revitalize itself and change. They did change how we interact with our technology in a very short amount of time. I think the jury's still out on whether Apple can still keep that momentum going.
Yeah. All right, Paul. Where do you sent me a very nice article? We'll put it on the links as well. The fact that the Apple TV, the beta version, the upgrade, looks very nice. They got a nice interface. But where do you think that they're going? And the fact that they're losing market share, is it like Adrian said, all these smart devices, or is it something with the set-top boxes and the other streaming devices?
Well, to start with, heaven forbid I worry, but I think that a online magazine would do anything to create a good headline. But as they lead with it, their market share has plummeted 11 points. Down hidden in the next paragraph is that their year-over-year growth rate in Apple TV has slowed to a mere 12% a year.
Yes.
I mean, companies would kill for that kind of growth rate along it. As well as with market share, Apple TV sits right about the top of the pyramid for cost within these. The Roku 3 is probably about the same street price as the Apple TV, but if you're breaking up market share with Roku, where does Roku sell the $95 devices versus the $30 devices that they have? And as far as market share, where things go. And I'm not an Apple fanboy by any means, and I do have a Google Play that was handed to me as a demo, and I hate having to fire up a touchscreen to to go onto Netflix on my iPad or on my Android tablet to be able to play something on the TV, as opposed to, at least the Apple TV has a remote control, and you have some pieces between it. But the Roku is a very simple device with a remote control, and works just like the cable box that people have. And I'm wondering if some of it is that we're past the early adopters, and the people who are picking up these devices now are either picking up, one for, like I do, where I stuck the Google in my bedroom, or so they're picking up a lower cost second device, or they're people who don't have big needs. And I'm not a guy for streaming. I do Netflix, Pandora, maybe YouTube if I have to watch something long, but I'm not a unplugged guy. I watch more streaming because I have IPTV distribution in my house on that side, which also doesn't work with Apple.
Of course you do.
Well, yeah. Doesn't everybody?
Well,
Sure, kinda.
I'm a humble design consultant and independent programmer, so I don't work for a public company.
Let me tell you, when I buy AMX gear for myself, I buy it on eBay.
Really?
Oh yeah, if you watch the sales, it's you can get incredible deals. You can't really use it for professional integration, but it works fine. And if something doesn't work, I can probably walk upstairs and find somebody who can fix it.
Well, you do have that option. Again, you do not have that
Warranty? What warranty?
Yeah, what warranty? Huh? What?
Yeah.
Paul, where'd you get this? We've sold. Does this say Panjo on the back? Good Lord. All right.
I'm trying to weed out the Panja stuff.
Well, thank you. The entire AV community thanks you, and I'm sure everybody down there in Texas does as well. So, especially my buddy Sean Robinson. All right, let's.
Panja is not a real good word around here.
I'll bet not. Good Lord. Who was it? Dawn Mead told me once when that first came out, somebody Googled it, and let's just say that you shouldn't Google it and then misspell it.
Oh, yes.
Very not safe for work things will happen on your computer.
That got emailed around the AV industry really quickly.
Oh my, yeah. All right, real quickly, and I told Paul this off the air, and I'll apologize to him here officially live. Had a couple stories this week about AMX's competitor. He's like, let's go for it. So we'll at least hit one of them. A story came out of our buddies over at CE Pro, and God love them. Yeah, they work their butts off, trying to uncover stories and stuff like that. Here's the most interesting one that came out this week. Pyng, P-Y-N-G. It's apparently a new product from Crestron. I say apparently because, according to the story by CE Pro, Crestron has applied for some patents, and they've been awarded a couple patents, and there have been a couple updates to the story. We'll go through it here real quickly. But nobody really has been able to say what Pyng is. Now, a side note to this is the fact that Pyng was actually picked as one of the CEDIA new products, and CE Pro kind of elaborate on that. The people who judge it sign NDAs, which is non-disclosure agreements. So there are a handful of people in the industry who do know what this is outside of Jersey, right? None of the three of them are here on this call. So I'm going to put it to you guys, and Paul, I'll defer to you last. We'll have Adrian here first as an integrator. What do you think Pyng is, I guess, based on the information and solely on the information that CE Pro has provided up to this point?
Yeah, I think it sounds like it's probably some sort of connected device that tracks you in a room, and you put your user settings on it, and your touch panel's configured the way you want it when you walk into the bedroom or something to that effect. But I kind of take umbrage to the whole thing. It's been nominated for an award, and nobody knows what it is, and it's like it's just there for the sake. It's Crestron, give them an award.
Oh, jeez. Nobody would ever do that.
No. It's almost like Crestron's becoming the Apple of our industry. When something new and exclusive is happening, it's hey, I got a Crestron scoop for you. Guess what they're doing? But
ever since
I'll
they
be
invented
intrigued.
4K,
What's that?
ever since they invented 4K, it's been like that.
Yeah. And we're going to certify everything too. So
They didn't invent 4K, did they?
It's not what their marketing materials sound like.
Don't
and
always
just remember, it's not really 4K because we're dropping bits in the color space and doing other funky things. Because
Well, and there's
pipe is
several
only so big.
flavors and
But it's certified.
I'm going to be getting that phone call from very angry Crestron people in a few minutes. I don't know.
you and me both. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about 4K for a second. There was another story that we weren't. There's a device out there now. Give me a second, and I'll bring it up. It is a certified 4K display. Okay, and I'm kind of tap dancing here because I've lost the stinking story. Silicon Core is now claiming that they are 4K certified by Crestron. Interesting. It is a 1.5 millimeter LED, and problem with it is it's a 1080p display. So
it's a 20-inch 1080p display.
well, there you go, 20-inch. That's really useful at my house on my desk.
But it's 4K, right?
But yeah,
But it's not 4K, it's 1080p.
1080p.
But Silicon Core, let me start by saying these are beautiful monitors. And the big thing about Silicon Core is they've been able to get incredibly good mullions, and they're very bright. So you stack up a lot of them. So if you saw their 4K display at Infocom, they were using a 12 by 12 and saying it's 4K, which meant actually each monitor was showing 320 by 180, but on their 1080p. But Silicon Core also doesn't make the back-end processing that splits it across those walls. So from reading it, my guess was Crestron likes the fact that the pixels are very close together, and therefore it's certifiable for 4K.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, here's the thing. I did go through there, not just there, but a couple of things with Crestron when it comes to 4K, and most of the stuff, the Silicon Core stuff aside, they do literally have, big fancy schmancy machine that pushes 4K through, and they do a lot of work with these various displays. I just thought it was odd that this one company, Silicon Core, I don't know, I don't have any dealings with them other than, looking at some of their products at Infocom, would put forth a 1080p that's now 4K certified. I didn't understand that. Maybe I need to get.
My guess is two things. One, Crestron needed somebody to apply for certification.
Yeah.
And two, there's some level of partnership because all of the big monitors in the Crestron booth at Infocom were Silicon Core.
Even the big Mamma Jamma?
Yeah. And when we had our Crestron Dog and Pony show, and we talked a little bit about 4K and what we should be doing for 4K, and I'm still kind of, it's what truly is 4K, because a lot of the products that are saying they're 4K are not truly 4K because they're falling in that UHD TV stuff where it's really not that 4096 by, was it 2160 or whatever they're calling it now these days. So we're at the early stages, I think, of 4K and adoption and content. And
well, here's the thing, and a couple of things. I'll post a link up to another podcast done by Jason Griffin and Big Nate Snyder that he had on. They had on Mark Coxon and Josh Schrago, who both of them very smart gentlemen who delved into 4K extensively. 4K is one of those weird things, right? I mean, this is kind of reminiscent to me, at least, of quote unquote HD. 10, 15 years ago when we started talking about quote-unquote HD, there was, 3 flavors, right? Some people will argue 4. I don't want to get in the 4th one. There were 3 flavors. There was 720p, there was 1080i, and there was 1080p. Right. And you could go into a customer's meeting, right, into an integration meeting and say, I'm going to give you HD. And the next guy will say, I'm going to give you HD. And the girl across the table, I'm going to give you HD. And all 3 of us can design a separate system altogether, not even giving you the same resolution. Same thing's happening today, right? Yeah. Whether you're using AMX or Crestron or Kramer or whoever, it depends on what the infrastructure can deliver. And I think that's kind of what they're getting at. This silicon core thing aside, as long as you are able to, the infrastructure, and Paul, this goes back to you guys too, and I've had conversations with John Robinson about this, as long as from the manufacturer standpoint, your switchers and your cabling and the endpoints can support up to the maximum of what 4K is, guys like us and guys like Adrian and the guys and girls who put this stuff in will be fine, regardless of what the clients want us to do. As long as you guys give it to us, we're fine.
Yeah, it'll work perfectly, just like EDID, which solved all this
problem. We got through this once. We did. We'll get through it.
Yeah, we'll get through this again, and everyone will have to buy a new TV, and then they'll say, "Guess what's coming down the pipe?"
Yeah.
8K.
8K 3D.
Yeah.
What that 3D?
I personally would throw my vote behind 2160. 3840 by 2160, just because it makes the math easy to do. The reason that 4K was originally there, before anybody thought about how we're going to scale a monitor, was because that's what the guys at Red could squeeze out of a digital camera.
Yeah.
And they wanted to get it wide enough, and with editing, aspect ratio, extra pixels, you can move things around. It's great. But then when it moves into the manufacturing, they're saying, well, we're building a big 16 by 9 piece of glass, and we can cut it exactly into 4 and have 1080p monitors or 4K monitors, and everything's fine. So the manufacturing is going to definitely push towards the quad 1080p type arrangement, which is fine. But the real issue is going to be Pro AV is going to very much suffer over this, because once you push copper past 10 gigabits, you have a very hard time getting it any distance down a copper. So the interesting thing about HDMI 2 will be they'll come out with it, but nobody will tell you, and this is conjecture because nobody's told me either, that you can get a 6-foot cable, because Sony, who really cares about this, thinks that a 6-foot cable is all you really need.
Okay, so here's where I'll go with that, right? I agree with you.
Totally.
And I think it's a good thing. Here's why. I have been writing and screaming for the last 2 or 3 years about when on earth is the price of fiber going to come down. Fiber is a great infrastructure. Personal opinion. All this is, right? Not a manufacturer, have don't own stock in any manufacturer, nothing like that. I think that fiber is a great infrastructure, but it's freaking expensive as all get out, and it's not difficult to terminate much anymore. It's not like 20 and 30 years ago where you had to polish all the crap like that. It's relatively simple to terminate now. It's a great infrastructure. You can send gigabits down the thing.
You can send anything down it.
Yeah, literally anything down it. But it's expensive as all get out. I think this, seriously, Paul, has a very good chance of driving the cost down on fiber and making it more ubiquitous.
I think so. The AV world hasn't really driven the fiber. The IT world has. And the interesting thing that will happen in the IT world is if you look at HD-based T and various implementations of HD-based T-like things over fiber, they look suspiciously like 10 gigabit Ethernet on the physical layer. The voltages, the modulations are the same. And for that matter, on the SFP base, we're using the same SFPs for fiber, the small format pluggable, the little fiber transceivers that are for the 10 gigabit Ethernet market. Because 10 gigabit Ethernet is becoming more commonplace, those prices are dropping. There are not enough fiber switches in the AV industry to ever bring down the price of those things, but Cisco decides to run a end of quarter special, and suddenly the bottom drops out of the market because it becomes a commodity. Right. So AV can follow along that way, but 10 gigabit fiber is only going to get us through 4K P60.
Okay.
And then barely into 4K P60, depending on how to play with it. If they're really talking at 8-bit, if they're really talking about moving to 8K, we're going to have to push up into a 40 gig fiber, which is going to be a 40 gig Ethernet is out. And you can run it on copper, but you can only run it about 8 feet. So then we hopefully will be able to follow that price drop. But the big question becomes, how will that happen? Because the consumer won't matter. Because ultimately the way 4K is going to get delivered is via streaming, and it's probably going to be asymmetrical streaming. So Netlinks doesn't care if they've got a 2-hour movie, if it takes them 24 hours of running it on their fastest computer to compress it down with H.265, because the playback's asymmetric and they can get it out and they can push it off. It's a very different world than you or I when somebody hands us the connector coming out of their laptop and we've got to put it 100 yards down the field.
Yeah. And
we don't have several hours to get it there.
Yeah, we don't have the encoding. It needs to be real time.
Yes.
But, and you're not going to get a real time encoding. And this is an argument I have a lot of times with people as we talk about some of the need for real time. If you look at the SVSI and the immersive, and SVSI has done a very good job where they've got their uncompressed, which is screamingly fast. And then they've got their motion JPEG, which is pretty damn fast. And then they've got their H.264, and there's no way anybody is ever going to get any of the MPEG formats to look good if I'm trying to wiggle a mouse and watch it on the screen. I'm going to go nuts. There's just too much latency built into any of the MPEG processes to do that. And so it's going to be, are we going to be able to deal with latency, or are we going to put big fat pipes, or is it going to be somewhere in between? And I would argue somewhere in between. AVB stakes their world on it being there at exactly the right time, which is very important. If I'm running delay towers in a stadium, I want them all synchronized really damn well because I'm going to have phases bouncing around. But on the other hand, I work in enterprise AV. If the audio from this room gets to that room over on the next building 35 milliseconds later, who the hell's going to care?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that you're going to start to see a balance. So you'll see my perfect world would have something where we can ingest and then have various levels of, one of the things I look at in a big switcher, just to pump things in our DGX line. My view is I run HDMI in the rack, I run HD base T in the room, and if it's leaving the room and going to a core, I run fiber, because I'm dealing with a cost-hassle balance on where things go. And the fiber is a little more expensive, but on a long run, and especially if you're pushing 100 meters on HD base T, Cat6e ain't cheap, and you can't ever find anybody to field terminate it right.
Oh, you're not looking. You're not looking good.
Well,
I'll terminate Cat6e all day.
Cat6 shielded. Cat6
shielded. Yes, all day. Not a problem.
Oh, and that's fine. But I'm talking to consultants who are saying we're putting out our bid specs that that we're only allowing installed factory terminated certified cabling. So if you're talking, which means you're pulling with an RJ45 on it,
which is not good.
No.
which is not good, and a factory certified cable. And now, if you as an AV integrator say, we're going to terminate, but the consultant says we have to certify, you're into a $9,000 to $10,000 ideal or fluke meter to certify it.
Yep.
Whereas your fiber, if you want to certify it, you buy your $600 owl. If you just want to test it and not have it calibrated, you buy your $200 owl, and you're there.
Yeah, and Paul makes good points. I mean, one of the big things when we talk about fiber is traditionally fiber is, at least in what I've seen in the last couple of years, it's in military applications, certain government secure applications, and then when we have to go long distances. That's the only time fiber is really getting used and talked about in the sense of creating backbone infrastructure. It depends on our clients whether or not they want it or not.
And see, that's why I'm excited about, you know, the fact that all these higher resolutions may very well push the need for fiber.
I think it's going to, because the other grumbling I hear, especially in the video industry, is that the production people say that because of everything being so close together and you having so many pixels, that 8 bits of color separation isn't enough for 4K, and they would like to go to 12 bits, which is going to give you 50% more bits to deal with.
Yeah. Had to do the math there in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that and when we talk about broadcast, that brings a whole other level of complexity when you start dealing with fiber, because broadcast comes in two flavors. You're either a mobile truck or you're a fixed house, and if you do fiber in a mobile environment and something breaks, well, you know, your truck's down for a little bit, you know, and you can't have that during the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But you still want to have all of those pixels, all that beautiful picture. You want to have that 4K for that, you know, first, you know, handoff. But as you said, Tim, this is going to be an interesting time.
It will be. And here's the other thing with that. I think that it has the opportunity to, how do I put this, reinvigorate the over-the-air signal. And this is the reason I say that. A good friend of mine who's an old broadcast engineer, he works for an audio company now, has screamed for years, it doesn't matter what your TV is. It can be a 720p, it can be 1080, because you're not getting anything higher than 720p currently on your satellite box or your cable box, right? It doesn't matter. You're not getting 1080p because they're compressing it so much.
Right.
And the fact that countries like South Korea and Japan have already broadcast 8K.
Japan's broadcast 13K and 12K and 18K over the air.
Over the air. So that's why I'm saying it may very well reinvigorate the over-the-air, you know, infrastructure in this country, and, you know, swing the pendulum back the other way to where, you know, we're not a primarily cable/satellite country where we're
and that brings into other things about how our infrastructure is so badly taken care of and used.
Oh yes.
We will go overseas to Japan or even South Korea. They're streaming, you know, 1080p, non-compressed, 2 tablets, 2 phones, blazing fast internet, and we have miles of dark fiber. I remember many years ago that when in the residential market where it was new house construction, where you were pre-wiring a house with, you know, your bundled coax and you know, twisted pair, and there were even places that were doing 2 coax, twisted pair, and a fiber run in every single wall plate. And a lot of that stuff is all dark and not used because the consumer just has no clue how to make it useful in their home.
Yeah. Well, and it's in the cities too. We reaped the benefit for a long time of the thought that in the 90s everybody thought they would become a billionaire by laying fiber, and then went bankrupt and all that fiber got sold off cheaply, and we caught a lot of boom for that, but nobody's really put in those massive fiber plants since then, and eventually it's going to fill up. And one of the reasons that Northern Virginia does so well is because MCI strung fiber everywhere in Northern Virginia, and the cities got into it. When Alexandria, Virginia, let their cable contract back in the mid-'90s, they forced the cable company to put dark fiber anywhere they were going to run coax runs.
Oh,
and,
wow.
the cable company fought and fought and fought, and I'll bet you they're so glad that they were forced to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got an ODN box on the side of the house, and it's got 2 or 3 fibers coming into it, and I've got a couple coaxes and a couple twisted pairs that come right out into the house. So the infrastructure's there. It's just not utilized effectively anymore.
Yeah. All right, a couple more stories, guys, before I let you go. First of all,
totally hijacked your show. I'm sorry.
Paul, you're new
It's
here.
called Squirrel Vision.
I'll explain. That's the whole point of the show. The whole point is not me. The whole point is you guys. I just know smart people. I don't know. I'm not smart. You're the smart person.
What did we call this early on when we started doing this? Squirrel?
Yeah, squirrel. That was you, actually.
Yeah.
3 years ago. So.
Yeah.
All right, from our buddy over at Commercial Integrator Magazine, Tom LeBlanc. A case for showrooms making, not wasting money. Now, here is the interesting premise of this article here. And actually, another guy in the residential side of AV, John Siaka, wrote a piece about having a showroom. And so, Paul, we'll kick it off with you, because all three of us here pretty much work and live in the pro world, right? Yes, AMX has a residential side as well, but you guys primarily education and government and healthcare, and you guys are primarily pro. Adrian, that's you guys are not 90% government, but you're big time government, and you live in that whole little Atlantic region.
Yeah.
Infocom, Innovad, who I work for, that's our bread and butter. Education and corporate. So here's the question: what's the benefit, or is there a benefit for pro AV folks having a showroom? Mr. Paul, we'll start with you. Is there a benefit, not just from the manufacturer standpoint, but from let's say Avitexture? Is there a benefit of Avitexture having a showroom?
Avitexture has some very nice conference rooms.
Conference rooms, not a show. I'm talking about a showroom.
But the question is, where does that change? Avitexture is in the business of building really nice conference rooms.
Okay.
So I've been working for AMX for about 10 months. Prior to that, I worked for Lockheed Martin, but in the high-end Pro AV integration business. So, what did we build? What was our product? Classrooms, war rooms, presentation rooms, and conference rooms. And so we had really nice conference rooms. Actually, in my office, of the non-installer tech types, there were 5 of us down one hall, and we had 4 conference rooms. Wow. Because 2 reasons. One, because they were our demo areas and our test areas, so we would keep one to make sure we always had it good, but we're doing it. Second, when I don't have a tech out on a job, I prefer to keep them busy, because otherwise they make hockey balls out of tape and break things back in the warehouse. So you can do that. But to bring in a customer and be able to show things, it's valuable in the setting that the customer is going to like. It's very important, especially with a customer who is kind of feeling their way as to what they need, to be able to point at and say, I like this, I don't like this. 8 different models of monitor on a wall, may not be that impressive, but here we have an integrated conference room, and we've put in, normally you wouldn't have 4 touch panels in a conference room, but we've got 4 in here because this is a showroom, conference room, mixed use space. And for the Pro AV, that's I would call that a showroom.
Okay, and that's valid. Adrian, Paul says you guys have very nice showrooms. So
Yeah, we've got some good spaces.
what's the value there?
Well, one of the things is, when I first started integration, the company I worked for, Apex, which is now Sharps AV in Canada, we did a total high-end showroom. You know, you had the dedicated theater and the VTC room and the conference room, so you could show that whole thing. And even now with integrators, it's valuable because if you should be bringing clients in as much as possible and bringing in vendors and showing how technology functions and how they interact with each other. And it's very hard to explain things like, say, a barcode click share to a customer without them physically touching and seeing it. And you always can't bring that to somebody. So if you can get a customer to sit down in an environment that is somewhat sterilized, but you need to show them how it works and get that look and feel and functionality, because sometimes I've found that clients don't quite understand what they want. They have a pretty good idea, but sometimes they can't explain exactly what they want. And if you give them the ability to kind of go, oh, yeah, this is what we're looking for, but we want it to do this, or we want a VTC environment, but we need it to work like this. But then on the flip side, you can also show them what is a best use for an environment. I've walked into tons of video conference rooms where it's the wrong table, it's the wrong paint, the wrong lighting, or the wrong acoustics, and then you have to sit there and work with that client and saying, hey, you've just built this great space, it's all wrong. They don't like that. And now you have to spend all of that money trying to fix it, where if you could say, this is what a typical VTC room should be like, or what a telepresence room could feel like, and if you look at a lot of the major manufacturers, especially in major city hubs, New York, San Francisco, DC Metro, Philly, Boston, you name it, they have these little hubbub show spaces where they're showing their technology, but they're showing really how it's supposed to work in an environment. And I think it's valuable for a customer who may not see this on a day-to-day basis, how it should work and supposed to work. And it also gives us, as integrators, the ability to try new products, to see what works and what doesn't, instead of guinea-pigging clients. I'm not a fan of saying, hey, look, it's the brand new spangled box, we're going to sell it to you. And then they wonder why they're angry at you when you're spending 6 weeks going, I don't know why it doesn't work. It worked at the trade show. So
because you haven't updated the firmware, Adrian.
Exactly.
It's the firmware.
Yeah, the firmware is the problem, right?
Is it Tuesday already? Time to update firmware again?
Yes.
Depending on which manufacturer you are, yes. So, and if you noticed in the article, I mean, they talked about Steelcase, and I remember many years ago when Steelcase was getting involved with the idea of having an AV integrator as part of their environment, because their whole thought was collaboration and integration of technology. And what better way is to bring AV integrators and partner with them, or buy or start AV integrators outright? And it makes sense. Integrators, you don't need to have the latest and greatest, but you need to show functionality and usability to customers. And the other thing is, if you do it right, you can bring people in. If you've got a good functioning VTC room, rent it out. It's not sitting. If you're not using it, rent it out. Bring people in.
Yeah.
And get some revenue cash out of that thing, and then people go, maybe I should buy one of these. We like this.
Or maybe, go ahead, Paul.
Or I'm going to say, I would say that for an AV integrator, a space they use / showroom is a better investment and probably a better showroom than having a big hall with mobile displays. And another thing that doesn't probably get done enough in any industry is forcing AV integrators to actually be consumers of integration will hopefully make them be better integrators. And I work for a manufacturer, and here comes my politically correct, but I don't know how many times as an integrator I would be out in the field and I would be cussing up and down, swearing that whoever designed this has never screwed anything in a rack in their life.
Yeah.
And you know, the empathy that comes with being on the other side makes you better at your job. So when you always do the panel that way, and your fourth meeting in a row, you realize, oh man, it's 3 pages deep to hang up the VTC. Suddenly, you stop doing that to your customer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, you can, if you'd like, that gentleman right there. His name is Paul. You can, well, you can go learn from him, I guess is the best way, is what I'm trying to say here on a Friday afternoon. I apologize. You can go to the Infocom Networking for the AV Industry program. It's going on in Texas next month, September 10th through the 12th. If you're going to CEDIA, don't bother because, well, that's the same dates as CEDIA. So, yeah, don't do that. But if you're in the DC area next week, is it, Paul?
Yeah.
You can go learn from him then. So where are you going to be, and what's the deal with that?
Next week, I'm speaking at the opener of the AMX Roadshow. Go to amx.com because I only go to the ones they tell me to go to. But we're going, the East Coast run starts in DC, Philadelphia, New York. I'm only going to be appearing at DC on this section. But because it's DC, and although I live in Texas now, I spent the previous almost 20 years doing AV integration in the DC area, so I'll at least be able to find people to buy me beer if I agree to speak. And one of the big focuses that we're going to have, and we're talking about essentially the issue, which has been forefront in the government, but is becoming more and more prevalent in the private area, of AV integrations being hampered by IT and security policy.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but it's not really the fault of the IT and security people. It's the AV industry has not kept up with the pace of that, because historically, if somebody was building a room and it needed an Ethernet switch, they went to Walmart, they bought one, they slapped it in there, never touched into the IT world, and everything was fine. But as unified communications, cloud applications, remote management and monitoring come in, it's becoming impossible to build a modern conference room without interconnection to the network, and so we have to abide by those policies. And it's also coming at a time of a perfect storm, because this year's the first time anybody ever fired a major company CEO over security problems. And it didn't happen in their servers. It happened in an air conditioning box.
Yeah.
And I keep awake at night, dreaming 60 minutes sitting in my lobby when I come in because somebody came in through a touch panel. And we don't want that to happen. But so there's now, combined with the fact that we're getting on this, we're behind the curve, there's a hyper-awareness within the industry of all of these devices where you used to say, it's an appliance, don't worry about it, we'll just stick it on the network. And that's not flying anymore.
No, it's not. We've covered on this program a couple different times the security issue and the fact that we have to keep up. Otherwise, there will become a time, and they may not show up at your desk, but they may show up at the integrator's front door. 60 minutes, that is, saying, hey, you let somebody in through this device. What do you have to say for yourself? And
it's across the whole industry. It's not just the integrators doing poor practices, not changing passwords and not protecting, not setting expectations for the customers. It's also the manufacturers. We don't have, in typical AV devices, we don't have the level of security that an IT guy in a multi-$1,000 AV device that an IT guy would expect to be in a $39 home router he goes and buys at Walmart. So there's a complete disconnect in the expectations and levels of capabilities between the two industries right now.
Yeah, Paul makes some really good points. I mean, when the whole Heartbleed vulnerabilities came out, I think I can count on my hand how many emails I've got from manufacturers saying, you don't have to worry about it, or you need to patch your firmware.
I hope you got the email from us, because they
yes,
ran us
we did get an
around.
email from AMX and
Yeah, they
Barco
ran us around for 2 days doing code searches in everywhere to find out if we had it in place, which we didn't. But it was still, everyone on our engineering team dropped whatever they were doing for 2 days to address that. So even though we weren't vulnerable, it's still, God, who knows, probably cost us 100 to 200 man days of effort just making sure we weren't vulnerable.
Yeah, and that costs money.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, that's why nothing's shipping until March.
I'm
so fired. I gotta cut off Sean's internet this week.
That's our scoop for the week. Nothing from AMX is shipping until March. And if you're listening to this,
2018.
that's a joke. Don, get back on the road. Don Robertson. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. Paul Zeal from AMX, obviously. You can catch Paul at a couple different places teaching. He taught at InfoComm 2014 this past June. But where can people find you or find out more about AMX?
Oh, if I'm willing to talk to you, you already know where to find me. But you can go to amx.com or call AMX, and you might be able to get filtered up to me. Just as far as the InfoComm Nouns goes, that is an InfoComm class that we happen to be teaching here. I was one of the developers of the class, and when I moved here, I saw I had a great big classroom of my own, so I offered to teach it. And September is the only one on the schedule right now, but we're doing it about once a month for the next year. And that's a partnership between AMX and InfoComm, where we're giving them the space and the teachers and lunch and everything in order to, in my mind, an AV integrator that understands IT is going to lessen everybody's problems in the industry. So we feel it's very important that the level of knowledge and professionalism within the IT-facing world in the AV industry come up. So this has been an international effort where we're doing it in Dallas, but they're also doing it in Australia and Europe to work with InfoComm to try to help the industry come up.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Adrian Boyd, as always, sir, now that you got your internet up and running, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's been a really good show, and actually I will probably see Paul in DC next week because I'm planning on going to the roadshow.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
But Adrian is from AVTexture, and where can people find out more about you or about AVTexture?
They can go to AVTexture's website, which is www.avtexture.com. They can see me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and just look for the AV CAD guy, or just look for me on Twitter, and you'll find me. And I haven't been as prolific on Twitter as I've been in the past. Been busy, but hopefully I'll start getting some more stuff out.
That's a horrible excuse. Been busy.
Hey, I've been busy.
I can't even imagine getting a thought out in 140 characters. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's the problem I run into. It's like, check this out. Oh, great! I'm at like 400.
That's what the shrinker thing is for. Just write a blog post and shrink it, and
yeah,
that's what I do.
My format is the 30-page white paper, and
oh jeez,
my thumbs just die if I try to.
Good night. I don't think I could think that much. So, all right, don't follow me. Go by the website if you would, please. avnation.tv. avnation.tv. You'll find this very program and a host of others. There's a place on there to sign up for our newsletter. do that if you would, please. That's actually kind of for people who do social media and people who don't do social media. It's just a way for us to keep you updated on what we're doing. We're getting a handful of people who are writing blogs for us, speaking of 30-page white papers. Bradford Ben's written one, Harry Mead, Gina Sansferivo. So yeah, John Green wrote a really great piece. So yeah, go by the website if you would, please. This show, our education-focused show, we're doing a new State of Control, which is our control and automation show. And actually, we're going to have a gentleman on there from AMS this month. So go by the website, avnation.tv, avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. This has been AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
This is AV.
This
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.